Hello everyone, I'm Rahul Agarwal and I work in a team that is responsible to build various integrations for different platforms. And today I'll be walking you through how to build a basic sales tax integration using Avalara APIs directly and then using one of our SDKs. The agenda for this session is first we will understand what Avalara integration means. Then I'll show you a short glimpse of how Avalara Developer Portal looks, and then we'll walk into the actual code for the integrations that we have built using APIs and SDKs. So now let us begin with understanding what Avalara integration really means. So all these businesses, they use various different kinds of financial applications like ERP, e-commerce platforms, and point of sales. And in these financial applications, they create the transactions. And while creating the transactions, they need to determine the accurate sales tax. And Avalara provides a set of APIs which is helping the clients to determine accurate sales taxes. So now, in order to consume Avalara APIs into your financial application, you need to write a code. What that code does is, in real time, it will fetch the required information from your financial application. It will create the Avalara request object. It will make an API call and then fetch the response from the API, read it, process it, and then send it back to the financial application. So all of this is nothing but Avalara integration. So now in order to build these integrations, you need to know a lot of information, and Avalara Developer Portal is the place wherein you will get all this information readily available. So let us just have a short glimpse of the portal. So this is how the portal looks like, and if you see, there are various different sections that you can use to learn and explore. So this particular section is for the SDKs that we have. So here there are different SDKs that we provide for all our APIs. Then this particular section is used to explore the different APIs that we have for different verticals. And in this session, we'll be building the sales tax integration, and for that, our tax API is used. And here you will see all the endpoints that are available in this particular API. And these are the top 10 endpoints that are widely used. So we'll be using create transaction endpoint in this session to build the sales tax integration. So this create transaction endpoint is actually used to create the transaction at Avalara side, and at the same time it also returns you the sales tax details for that particular transaction. So here you will get the details for this particular endpoint, and here if you see, you will get the sample input and the parameters that this endpoint supports. This is the model wherein you will get to see all the fields that this endpoint supports. So I will not go into much details for Developer Portal because there is another session coming up later in the day in which you will get to know a lot more about Developer Portal and how to use it efficiently to build your integrations. So now let us go back to our agenda. And now we'll be actually moving into the actual code wherein we'll see how to build the integrations using APIs and SDKs. So I have created two different code samples. One is used for consuming the APIs directly, and other one is using one of our SDKs. So I have written these codes in C# language using Visual Studio Code Editor. And without waiting further, let us directly see the code. First, we'll see the integration which is consuming the APIs directly. So here there are two different ways. One is you can play with JSON directly, but that is very tedious and not recommended. So the better approach is to use models and enums created in your code. So if you see here, I have already created the required enums and models. And again, the information for these enums and models you will get in our developer portal. So now once those are created, we can directly go and start building our integration. So the first part is to authenticate. For authentication, what you can do is either use basic authentication or use bearer tokens. In this sample, I'm using a basic authentication wherein you supply your username and password separated by colon, and encoded in base 64 encoding system. The other important field that you need to pass in header is x-avalara-client. This is a profile attribute that is used for tracking and debugging purposes. And it is basically a combination of 5 different values separated by semicolon. So the first value is the name of your financial application. Second is the version of your financial application. Third is your library name. So library name in this case could be free text because we are not using any predefined library or SDK. So you can mention any name that you want here for tracking purpose. And this is the version of your library. And last one is the machine name on which this transaction is created. So for create transaction, it is a post call, and this is the URL for the endpoint. So now let us create the request object, the body of this request object, and in that we use create transaction model, and this model has all the fields that we can use to map the data. So the left hand side, you see these fields are Avalara fields, and right hand side is the data that is your transactional data. So for this demo purpose, I have used these hard-coded values, but in real world, these values will be coming from your financial application. So I've used some of the most commonly used fields. So date is one of them. So date is basically the date in which this document was created. Then customer code. Customer code is nothing but customer name or code that comes from your application. Code is the unique identifier for this particular transaction, and again this is coming from your financial application. Type is the transaction type, like purchase invoice, purchase order, sales invoice, sales order. Company code. Now as you have multiple companies in your financial application, similarly you can have multiple companies in Avalara account. So you need to pass the company name here in which this transaction should belong. Then reference code is again used just for tracking purposes. If at all you want this transaction to be referred by some other transaction, then that transaction's number is something that you can pass over here. Commit is if you want this transaction to be committed at Avalara site, you can pass true, otherwise false. Batch code is if at all this transaction is part of any batch, then you can supply that batch name or code in this particular field. Currency code by default is USD, but if you are dealing with multiple currencies, then you can supply accordingly in this field. Description is again a free text in which you can send any description for this particular transaction. Email is the customer email. So these are some of the header level fields for this particular transaction that we are using. Now next is to add line. It is mandatory to have at least one line for your transaction. So, and you can have multiple lines, of course. For simplicity, I have just created one line here. So number is the line number that again comes from your application. Quantity is the quantity of this particular line item. Amount, again, for this particular line item, what is the amount? In this case, we are using $100. Then discounted, if this flag is true, that means whatever the discount you have applied to the transaction, it will automatically be applicable for this particular line item. And if it is false, then this line item will be ignored in case of discounts. Now tax code is an Avalara concept. Basically, you can have custom tax rules and custom tax codes created in your Avalara account. And if you want to override the standard tax rules of Avalara, and if you want some custom tax rules to be applied, then you can leverage this field for that. P7 times 0 is the default tax code that we use. Next is address. So again, it is mandatory to have at least one address for your transaction. So here we have created a single location address, and you can have multiple addresses like ship from, ship to, point of origin, and different types are available. Next is using parameter items. So parameters are basically used for advanced tax types like VAT. So here you can send the name of that parameter, unit of measurement, and value. So this is something that you will get to learn more in one of the next sessions, wherein that session is dedicated on VAT, and then you will get to know more on how to use parameters. So once you have added these details, now this code is nothing but just making an API call, and whatever the response you get is available in this particular parameter. So if you see, this parameter will have various fields like ID. ID is the transaction ID of Avalara. Now this transaction is created in Avalara side as well. So whatever the unique identifier Avalara generated, that is given in the response field of ID. Then total amount is the same amount that you passed for this particular transaction. Discount is again the same thing that you passed. Exempt is whatever the exempted value was this for this particular transaction. And whatever the taxable amount for this transaction was, it is in total taxable field. This is the most important field in the response, that is total tax. So this is something that Avalara calculates, and then it returns in the response, which is the accurate sales tax that is to be charged for this particular transaction. And these lines are for the jurisdiction breakups. So in summary field, you will get the jurisdiction breakups for this particular transaction, like what the jurisdiction type was, what was the name, and what was the tax breakup for that particular jurisdiction. So again, for this demo, I have just printed these values in the console, but in real world, these values are supposed to go back to your financial application. So now let us execute this and see how the response actually looks. So again, as I said, here you will just get to see the response fields, but in real time environment, these values are supposed to go back to a financial application and needs to be updated for this particular transaction. So this is the transaction ID that was generated by Avalara. Total amount was $100, as we had only one line whose amount was 100. Discount, we did not apply anything. Exempt, we did not apply anything. So the total taxable amount is same as $100. And the tax that Avalara computed for this particular transaction is 10.1. And this is the jurisdiction breakup, like state, county, and city. So now let us try to apply discount to this particular transaction. So it is to be supplied in the field named discount. And for example, I'll apply a discount of $10. So let us see now when we apply discount, then how it changes in the response. So here we have the response back. So again, here if you see, the discount applied is $10, and so the taxable amount becomes $90, and accordingly the tax has been changed, and also the jurisdiction breakups have changed accordingly. So now let us try to exempt this transaction. So again, exemptions, you can do it in two ways, either by providing exemption number or by providing entity use code. So there's another session again scheduled later in the day, which will talk more about how to handle exemptions efficiently. So for this demo, I'll just use exemption number, and I'll provide some exemption number, and let us see how it works. So please note that this exemption number, this is not validated by Avalara, but you need to take a care in providing that, because you might have to produce that to the authorities. So what Avalara does is, if at all you are providing any exemption number, so Avalara will just assume that it has to be exempted. So here is the response back. If you see, now exempt value becomes 90 and taxable value becomes 0, and thus the tax is 0 and jurisdiction breakups is all 0. This transaction is completely exempted. So now there's another important feature that Avalara provides, that is tax override. So let us see what it is. So tax override is nothing but, in special cases, if you already have tax calculated for a particular transaction, and if you want that to be recorded for it, and you don't want Avalara to calculate, so you can use tax override in that case. So you have to use tax override model, and you have to supply the reason. In this case, I'm hard coding it as pre-calculated tax, then type of this particular tax override. It could be tax amount or tax date. and then the amount that should be overridden for this particular transaction. Here I'm using it as $20. So let us see now how the response looks. Now you'll observe that tax override takes the topmost precedence. So we had applied discount, we had applied exemption, but now since tax override is also applied, all of those things will be ignored and tax override will take the topmost precedence. So here it is. The amount was $100, discount is 10. So exemption, we have provided exemption number, but still it is not exempting it. So the taxable amount becomes 90 and the tax is $20 that we provided to Avalara, like which was the overridden value. So accordingly, this $20 is broken up into the jurisdictions also. So this is a basic sales tax integration that we just built using Avalara APIs directly. It is simple and straightforward. What you need to do is just fetch the right data from your financial application and map it to the right Avalara fields, and then you are done. So now let us see the same code, same integration using SDK. So when you use SDK, then if you observe, the code has been reduced significantly. The number of lines of code is now only this much as compared to the earlier version. And also here you don't need to create the enums and values because that come out of the box in SDK. And also SDK, it takes care of a lot of things for which you don't have to write the code. So these are some of the benefits that you get out of the SDKs. Plus, we are also planning to enhance our SDKs with more capabilities like authentication, telemetry, observability, and some more. So let us see how the code looks like in case of SDK. So here you just have to create a client of class Avatax client, and you need to provide in the values of the name of your financial application, version of your financial application, and the machine name. You must have noticed that now we are not providing the SDK name and SDK version. That is because it will get automatically populated. And here we don't provide the URL, but we just provide the environment, whether it is sandbox or production. And for authentication, we just use a method with security, and then we pass username and password to it. So now we have to create the transaction as we did in the earlier example as well. So for that, we have to create an object of class transaction builder. So transaction builder takes parameters as first one is the client that we just created, then the company code, the transaction type, and the customer code. And after that, you can provide all the fields to this by using various different methods that SDK provides. Like if you just write with, you'll be able to see that there are various different methods that are provided, and whatever information you want to pass on to Avalara for this particular transaction, you can use the corresponding method and provide the required information. So here we have used with date to pass the date. With transaction code is the unique identifier for this particular transaction coming from your financial application. Reference code with commit means it is to be committed. If you don't add this, then it will not be committed. With batch code is for the batch code. This is for currency code. This is for description. This is email. And this is how you add the line using SDK with line, and then you provide the amount, quantity, and tax code. And with item discount is the function that you can use to indicate whether this line has to be discounted or not. With address is the function that you can use to add the address for this particular transaction. And as we saw earlier, single location is what we are using here, but you can use point of origin, point of order, ship from, ship to, various different types of addresses as well. With parameter is used to add the parameter items to this particular transaction. With discount amount is to apply the discount. With exemption number is to exempt the transaction. And with tax override is used to override the transaction. So here similarly we have provided the reason, type, and the amount that has to be overridden. So let us execute this. Now again in this case we have applied tax override, so it will take the topmost precedence, and the tax that you will get return is $20. So similar to earlier case, you will get the same kind of response. So basically all this part of your code doesn't change. This remains the same. What changes is the formation of your request object and making an API call. So this is how you build a basic sales tax integration using our SDKs. And now we have seen like the code, the sales tax integration code for both the cases. And now with that, I am opening up for questions. Thank you.